I'm Seda Saluk. And I use she, her pronouns. I'm a medical anthropologist by training, and I work as assistant professor of women's and gender studies at the University of Michigan. In my work, I focus on the rise of reproductive surveillance in Turkey as related to demographic anxieties around declining birth rates and changing fertility patterns among Turkish and non-Turkish communities. I specifically look at how supposedly revolutionary technologies such as information systems are used in medical institutions to track women's reproductive lives. And I ask questions such as who is monitored by these technologies, by whom, how, and to what end, particularly through the angle of social inequalities such as class, race, and ethnicity. And I'm kind of interested in what the answers to these questions tell us about global reproductive governance in general and the making of the so-called modern Turkish nation in particular. Being part of Reproductive Righteousness Project today is important because it kind of gives us a comparative feminist perspective to see how reproductive discourses travel, how different political leaders borrow tactics from each other to justify their conservative policies, and what all these tell us about governing reproduction in general. And the comparative perspective especially is important because it gives us kind of a tool to move beyond exceptionalizing particular political actors or regions or historical periods, and to really see what are the commonalities between all these kind of ethno-nationalist reproductive policies and what are the differences. Reproductive righteousness is a shared political grammar that is used by political leaders around the world today. We see a surge in right-wing populist regimes today all around the world. Our political leaders are increasingly relying on narrative of national or demographic crisis. They frame religious or ethno-racialized others as the ultimate problems or reasons behind these crises, and frame themselves as the saviors of this crisis. So reproductive righteousness is kind of this political repertoire that is used to justify kind of conservative political agendas, such as limiting abortion, limiting kind of birth control, or limiting immigration, or increasing surveillance, especially over marginalized communities. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan frequently invites women to give birth to at least 3 children by kind of drawing attention to the dangers waiting for the nation if they do not reproduce. So these invitations are kind of perfect example of reproductive righteousness in the world today. And they kind of illustrate the ongoing pronatalist discourses and policies that have been rise in Turkey since the early 2000s. When Erdogan invites women to reproduce, he usually kind of talks in public speeches. He performs a hyper-masculinized kind of public performance that is amplified by the use of hand gestures, use of voice, or use of camera angles. And I think this hyper-masculinized persona is kind of an important component of right-wing populist regimes today all around the world. Through these very hyper-masculinized public speeches, political leaders test the waters before legislation changes, send informal messages to other state officials or other political leaders, and they really shape public perceptions. So these kind of speeches intervening in kind of reproductive behaviors are, they become key kind of policymaking practices without really changing legislations on the ground. So I think they are really kind of important examples of reproductive righteousness in the world today. When we look at reproduction and reproductive politics in the broader Middle East today, usually the public discussion revolves around religion and religious rhetoric. Religion is important in shaping reproductive politics, but it is only one part of the reproductive governance strategy of political leaders. Other practices of power, such as the construction of nationalism, or constructions of race and ethnicity, are also important in shaping reproductive politics. So when Erdogan, for instance, invites women to reproduce, he only invites Sunni Muslim Turkish women, and frequently he and his party members frames, for instance, Kurdish women as dangerous for the political arithmetic of the country. So there's this ongoing, long-standing reproductive discourse about replacement of Sunni Muslim Turkish communities by either non-Muslim communities or non-Turkish communities, which is increasingly becoming or taking central space in reproductive politics and reproductive righteousness in Turkey.